Hello, welcome back to Happy Stitching from Magic Hour Cross Stitch Supplies. I'm Donna Murphy, that's Serena Murphy, my daughter behind the camera, and we're continuing our video series aimed at beginner cross stitchers who are starting their very first project. So we've already talked about patterns and fabric and floss and how to grid your fabric and how to know what size of fabric that you need. And now we're ready to make our first stitch. There's just a little bit more preparation to do the actual stitch, and we're going to do that right now. So here's my pattern that we're working on. I'm working on Groovy. So I've decided to do Groovy on this 14 count plain Aida. I decided on the 14 count because I want it to be on the back of a beach bag that I've already made the front of it for, and someday I will actually do that and turn it into a beach bag. But in the meantime, I want Groovy to be ready for the back. So here's the fabric. You remember that I marked my top, which is very important. And I'm just going to pop it right into my Q-snap so it can be ready. I just slide the full piece, the full square underneath, and center my stitching area. I'm going to be starting in the middle. Take a couple of my my clamps, put them on more or less straight down, and then you can rotate them outward to tighten the fabric. And do the same with the other two. And rotate them out. And now I have a nice tight surface to stitch on. That helps me get an even tension throughout my project. So that's important for having a nice smooth look. And the big cross here in the middle, that was where I marked the center of my fabric. That's going to be where I start stitching. Okay, and the other thing we want to do to get that ready is put my needle minder on. Remember, the needle minder is a handy accessory, remember from the first video, and that will help take care of my needle when I want to have my hands free. So we're just going to park it right there for the moment. Okay, the fabric's ready to stitch on. Now we need to get the pattern ready. We have found the fabric center, and we want to get my pattern. I like to, if it's not a really big pattern, I like to tape it together and make one piece. It's easier to work with for me. You might prefer to go page by page, but I like to tape mine together. So the important thing to do when you're doing that is on your pattern where there's more than one page, if you look on this is the third page. There's just a little bit here, but you can see there's some gray, dark gray, and two columns of stitches are in dark gray rather than on a white background. Those are called overlap stitches. Those two columns are also on the previous page, so that they repeat, and it helps you to line up your stitching. Whether you're taping it together or whether you're going page by page, doesn't matter. So if you're going to tape, the page that has the dark columns, the overlap stitches, leave that one. And on the previous one, you want to cut your pattern page right on the last line. So we're going to just cut right up here, exactly on the line or as close as you can manage to it. And that way you can cover up the overlap stitches and make a secure joint between your pages. So it just goes right up there. All right. Now I have used lots of different ways to put them together. I've used glue and masking tape and big tape, little tape, all kinds of tape. I finally found something that works really well. Two-sided tape, and it works great. So all you have to do, if you can find the end of your tape, it's here somewhere. Don't let it fall apart. Go back together. Okay, I found it. This is the end, I think. No, it is. Wow, this is really, really sticky tape. Ah, there we go. Okay, so you just roll off enough for the whole column. cut there. Thank you, Serena. And put it as close to the edge as you can. You want to cover up those two gray columns, but right close to the edge of those two gray columns. Just put that down. Now my paper here, I can line it up carefully and make sure that all the grid lines line up properly, and it should go together perfectly. Like that. Press from the center out. There we go. And now I have one big pattern. I have found that it's not a good idea to use tape on the top side and cover up some of the stitches, because highlighters don't cover up tape very well. We're going to get to the highlighters right now. So my pattern is ready. I can cut off this extra edge there so it's not, I won't do that right now, but it'll just be in the way. Okay, now we've found our center of our pattern, and that's where we want to start, because that will orient us for the rest, and we can work from the center outward, and we know that it'll fit within our grid. I've marked on here. Oh, so I've looked on there before, and I see, it's this symbol. It's a little upside down U-shaped arrow is what it is. So I look on my legend, and I see, that's number 973. That's a bright yellow, and I go to my floss box. This is my project box for this project, and I pull out my 973. Don't worry, I have more 973. And I've already cut off a piece, that much, remember, from the last video, and I've threaded up some needles. And I want to show you these needles, because needles are not all created equal. We have different brands. Let's show the different brands. I'm sorry that I tore off the brand name when I took off the price tag, but these are Bohin, B-O-H-I-N. They're excellent needles. We also have John James. Many people love the John James. I really like them, but they're very high quality needles. The Anchor and the DMC needles are often talked about as being less quality than the John James or the Bohin or the other brands. I don't see that much difference that I would, throw them away or anything like that. I use them, and when they don't last as long. That's one of the issues. Another issue is that the eye is sometimes not smoothed as much as it should be, and the floss will fray. So if you're finding that that's happening, that your floss is breaking or before you finish your piece, it's probably your needle. So that is time to throw away your needle and get a better needle. And I just wanted to show one of my little accessories that I love very much. It's just a dollar shop thing, but I call this my needle chest. So I just keep all my spare needles in here. I just love that little thing. Anyway, so I've got my needles ready, and we've looked at the pattern. And remember that in the previous video, we've talked about the information on the legend. And this pattern was designed for 18 count fabric. And at 18 count, it would be this size. However, we're choosing 14 count fabric. So where it says that you'd stitch with 2 strands of floss, we may need to modify that. I prefer to stitch with 3 strands on 14 count, because I prefer the coverage that 3 strands gives me. So on 14 count, because the stitches are quite a bit bigger, I find that if I use 2 strands, sometimes the fabric will show through between the stitches, and that's not always a look that I want. So I just have some examples here of different counts that we have. This one was one of the whips that I was doing for the video, and then I just went and finished the project because it was a lot of fun to stitch. But this one was done on 14 count. This is a 14 count hand dyed fabric, and 3 strands of floss. So you can see it gives really good coverage, no fabric showing through stitches anywhere, and looks great. This is a 16 count fabric, so it's a little bit finer. This has a story to it, this particular project. We'll talk about that another day, but anyway, it's 16 count fabric, and I used 2 strands on this. And you can see that it's pretty fine. They're good fine stitches, and they cover pretty well. So in between like a 16, I would do a little test patch on a corner with 2 strands and 3 strands and see how this particular fabric looks with the 2 different sizes. And you can always do that because not all fabrics are the same either. Even if they're the same count, they may be different. And then you have some other kinds of fabric. This is not Aida. This is 28 count Monaco. So in other words, where 14 count has 14 stitches to the inch, this has 28 stitches to the inch. So it's a very fine stitching. It's often stitched over 2 threads, but we're going to talk about that another day. I did this one over 1 thread with 1 strand of floss because I didn't want my finished project to be too big. If it's too big, then it's really expensive to frame, for one thing. And I do want to frame this one up. This will be the first project that I completed that I'm keeping for myself. I usually give them away. So this is a 28 count with 1 strand. So it's very dependent on what fabric you're using and the look that you want to go for in your finished project. So we have a 14 count. So I want 3 strands. So that's what I've got ready. I've chosen a needle. So the needles you can see these are all different brands, good brands, and it doesn't matter what brand they are. They'll all have a size somewhere on the package that will say how big it is. So these John James are 28, size 28. These little tapestry needles from Bowen are really nice for fine fabrics. They're shorter. And so if you like a really fine needle, they're called petites. And they're very nice to use, very smooth and easy to stitch with. But the eye is still big enough, it's easy to thread. So I really like those. And then the anchors are just regular needles. And those are good too. So I've got a few different ones here. You can see the difference in the sizes. And this one I use as an example, but it's actually, I've got it threaded up for a different project, for my Speak Friend and Enter project. So I can use either of these 2 needles, and I like to thread up more than 1 needle because it just slows me down. When I run out of thread, I like to have one ready for the next stitch. But I keep it not on board my actual project. I just put it aside. I have a needle minder on my stitching tray. So I have that ready. Okay, my needle's ready, my fabric is ready. Now let's get the pattern. So we have determined what is the center stitch. Oops, I got my thread underneath there. And that is what symbol that is. So I take my yellow highlighter and I yellow in all the stitches that are nearby that are that symbol. So for Groovy, it was easy because the letters are pretty regular and the stitches follow a pattern in the letters. So it's the outside and the inside of the O's. So there's more, each of the letters is outlined in this color, but I'm only highlighting the stitches that I intend to do before I change colors. So when I'm finished the O's, I might decide to switch to a different color. And then I will highlight those stitches. But I might choose to finish the yellows on the other colors, so then I can highlight those. But just do as much as you want to do before you change. So I've put a pink dot with this highlighter on the spot that corresponds to the center of the fabric. And you can see there's a crosshair of grid lines just below that. and I have also put a pink dot there. So I could choose, it's the same color in this pattern, so I can choose either one of those starting points and just make sure that it lines up with the fabric, and I'm good to go. Okay, so we've got our 973 from our floss box. We've got our needle threaded up with 3 strands of 973. And we're going to start, I'm going to start at the crosshairs of the grid lines. Now it's in the top left corner of that cross. So I'm going in the top left corner of that cross, and that is right here. So I'm on that one square of that's with a hole in each corner and thread in the middle, that's a stitch. So I'm putting it up in the bottom left corner and down in the top right corner. Everything is an X in cross stitch, hence the name, I guess. I'm pulling that through a little bit. You want to leave lots of tail at this point. And now I'm going down bottom right up to top left. But as I'm pulling it this time, I'm going to, you see, here's the tail. That's a little too much tail. I'm just going to gently pull it. I've got the loop in my fingers, so I'm going to gently pull it till there's about 3/4 of an inch left. And at that point, it kind of usually stands up by itself. Then I just lay the loop over it and grab hold of that tail like that. So as I pull it, it grabs the tail and locks it. Now my stitch won't come out even if I tug on my thread. And my stitches will be secure. So I'm going down into the top left of that stitch, and ta-da! We have our first stitch. Now, once I've done the first stitch, now this one is already pink, so let's do another stitch. We're going to do that one is on the right hand side. It's a column of 2 stitches, so I'm going to do the one beside it. So again, I'm going up from the bottom left corner, down in the top right corner. I don't have to lock it again, but if I want to, I can tuck the tail again, so make sure that it stays secure, because this is going to be a bag, remember, I want the stitches to be very secure. So I'm going to lock that again, so it's double locked in this case, and then finish that stitch. Okay. Now I've got those 2 stitches done. So very nice. All right, now the purpose of the pink highlighter is to keep track of your stitching. So I've done 2 stitches. Of course, it doesn't take this long when you're actually doing it. But now I'm going to mark this stitch as complete. So I just pink it in like that. So from there, I can either, so I have pinked in both of those stitches that I've done. Now I can either go down and around and up, or I can go up and around and go this way and just keep counting and moving over and just keep stitching. Remember to cross your stitches all in the same direction. So if you're starting bottom left, top right, that's the way you should do them all. Even if you have to, like, because of the way the stitches are lining up, you have to go the other direction. Make sure your under part of your stitch is always in that direction, and your top part is always this part. That's bottom leg, top leg. So make sure all your legs are the same. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and do a few stitches, and then I'll show you how to lock off when you want to change colors. So we're going to just do a few stitches here. We'll do a couple more, and then we'll close it off. Hi. Okay, so as I'm stitching, I'm pulling the thread and I feel that, oh, I have a little knot here. You don't want to just leave it there because however you're going to frame it, you don't want a little knot. This is a really simple one. It'll probably just come out when I pull on it. I just pull on the loop and it straightens out. I'm going to put my needle through here to leave it loose, and it will just pull straight. So I stitch two-handed, and I can keep tabs on what's happening in the back, but do check frequently for knots or clumps. They do happen. And some people get really antsy about it. They want their back to be perfect as well as their front. Some people just really don't care, and if it looks like a bird's nest, that's okay too. And either way is fine. Both are valid points of view, and I don't really obsess over it, but it's nice to have a nice, neat back, especially if you're going to frame. You don't want lumps and bumps in it if you're going to frame it. This isn't going to be framed, so it doesn't really matter, but I do like to, waste floss for one thing as you're stitching, so we're just going to do a couple more stitches here. I'll finish these 2 stitches. Okay, I've got 6 stitches in there. So I'm going to go to my pattern with my pinker, and I'm going to pink in those 6 stitches. So I did 2 before, those are already pink. Now I've pinked in 2 more. So let's say that's all there is of this color that's nearby. When it comes to reach, like how far would I go to the next patch of this color without tying off? There's a lot of opinions on that. Some people don't reach at all. Some people will go only 2 or 3 stitches, and some people don't care. They'll go all the way across your project. The farther you go, the greater the chance that you'll get some puckering if that thread gets caught up on something or something like that. So if you do reach really far, then try to weave it in the stitches that are back there. I don't have any back there yet, so luckily I'm not reaching very far. But if I did want to reach far, I probably wouldn't go more than about 1 inch at this point. And then that straight line, like for instance, if my next stitch was like a block away, 10 stitches away, I might come up here. And then I have a long straight piece of floss there that is kind of loose and hard to keep the tension on the stitches that come after. So you don't want to go too far on that. And again, weave it in to existing stitches if there are any, and that helps to lock it in. So I'm going to undo that stitch because I don't need that one. So I'm just going to poke it back through the same hole that I just made, and if I get it precise, it'll just pop right off as it did. Okay, so for taking the thread out, what we want to do is we need to make sure it's secure. That's the important part, but without leaving a bump. So I'm just going to take my needle. I've got this nice straight row of stitches here, and I'm just going to run my needle up that row of stitches and then reverse the direction and do it again. So I'm actually doing like a U-turn, but of course you can't put it back exactly where it was because it'll just come out. So just skip a stitch or start from a different point and go back again in the same direction. And it's very simple to do, and it locks it quite securely. You still want that tail from your start sticking out. You don't want to cover that up. So now we can cut that. Thank you. And again, you want about 3/4 of an inch. There we go. And stick that on my needle winder. And there we have that nicely locked off. And now I can choose to go to do a different color, except I already highlighted this, so I'm going to finish the yellow. And we just keep doing that again and again and again with all the different colors in our floss box. And when all of those beautiful colors have been used and finished, we'll have a beautiful picture. And that completes our series on starting your first project. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And I would love to see and hear your comments, see your projects. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have. And we will be doing more videos. So stay tuned to this channel. We haven't really figured that part out yet, but you'll find us. And we'll see you again on Happy Stitching from Magic Hour Cross Stitch Supplies. See you then.